Welcome and thank you very much to everyone who has joined us today for the webinar where we introduce the UNCDF Gender Self-Assessment Toolkit. We call it GSAT in short, for financial service providers and share insights from our Myanmar pilot. My name is Rajiv Kumar Gupta. I'm the program manager for UNCDF's SHIFT regional program. I would like to begin proceedings by first extending thanks to the Australian government which supported the development of UNCDF GSAT and the Myanmar pilot as part of its Gender Equality Fund. This is a fund which supports investments that promote gender equality in the Pacific and Southeast Asia. The activities we will present today fall in scope of UNCDF Shaping Inclusive Finance Transformations Program, SHIFT in short, which aims to expand women's economic empowerment through financial inclusion in the least developed countries of the ASEAN and SAARC regions. The activities also form part of UNCDF's country-level engagement within Myanmar. The objective of today's discussion will be to guide you through the tool development and structure, its application, and the self-assessment process, and share the main findings of self-assessment process by participating financial service providers in Myanmar. I'm joined here by my colleagues, Catherine Miles and Julia Zarati, the UNCDF gender consultants who developed the tool and led the self-assessment process in Myanmar. But before we start to provide an overview on the context and tool, I would like to request Catherine to read out a statement from Mrs. Vanessa Hegati from the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, who is unable to join us on the webinar today. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Rajiv. On behalf of the Australian Government's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, I'm pleased to read these remarks at today's webinar. In Myanmar, women represent an untapped market opportunity for financial service providers. Through gender-sensitive institutional policies, innovation and technology, financial service providers can not only close the gender access gap, but also enhance the market penetration of formal financial service provision. To enhance women's economic empowerment, it will be crucial to meet the needs of different segments of women's clients based on their economic strategies, whether that be employees, farmers or MSME owners. Through the support from the Australian Government's Development Assistance Programme, the United Nations Capital Development Fund, UNCDF, implemented a gender-based institutional technical support mechanism in order to assist Myanmar-based financial service providers to more effectively serve the women's market and improve their institutional policies and practices on gender and women's workforce participation, which we hope in doing so will contribute to improved profitability and market reach. Today, UNCDF will present its Gender Self-Assessment Toolkit for financial service providers and provide insights from the Myanmar pilot and its follow-up actions. We hope you find today's discussion useful. Thank you. So thank you very much, Rajiv. Thank you, Julia. Thank you to all of you who've joined on the call today. Before we start, I'd just like to say that we will be taking questions at the end of the presentations. However, if questions come up as you go along, please use the chat function on the Blue Jeans app to share those questions in advance. But as I say, we'll be dealing with those at the end of the presentation. I will present first and then we'll hear more from Julia on the pilot process and its findings. So to begin with, I'd like to share some context on women's economic participation and financial inclusion in Myanmar, where the pilot for the GSAT took place. So women represent more than half of Myanmar's total population and the country's working age population, yet they're more likely to remain economically inactive than men. Indeed, currently women's labour force participation rate is only approximately 50%, which falls well short of the male participation rate of approximately 85%. If we turn to financial inclusion, just under half of the adult population, at 48%, have formal financial access through banks and other regulated financial institutions. These include MFIs and cooperatives, and this is based on the latest FinScope figures from 2018. There are similar levels of financial inclusion between women and men. For example, 69% of women are financially included, both in terms of formal and informal access, compared to 70% of men. So it's broadly the same. However, there are gender diverse patterns of financial access and usage. For instance, as you can see from the slides, women access bank products at lower levels to men, and instead are using non-bank and informal channels more. I just say, if you haven't already muted yourself, if we could mute the sound for those who aren't currently speaking. In terms of these barriers and the reasons for these gender diverse patterns of financial access and usage, it remains to say that women and men can face barriers in accessing and using formal financial services due to a broad range of interconnected constraints. So some of these barriers are shared, so basically men and women share the same barriers, but women can also experience greater vulnerability to some of these shared constraints based on their gender. Women also face some distinct constraints which place them under greater restriction in terms of their financial inclusion. In 2017, UNCDF took a country assessment on the women's financial inclusion constraints in Myanmar, and it identified specific barriers that women and girls face in the enabling environment, in the supply, and in their demand for financial products and services, which are all mediated by the broader socio-cultural context. And you can see that here on the screen. And these diverse constraints limit women and girls' access, usage, and also their control over financial products and services in ways that constrain opportunities, their economic opportunities, agency, and resources, leading to their economic empowerment. And this is in a broader context where financial inclusion is recognised internationally as an enabler of women's economic empowerment and essential to achieve sustainable development. If we move on specifically to some of the constraints, on the supply side, the financial inclusion constraints firstly include low levels of women's leadership within financial service providers. So while women's participation is high in financial service providers, there remains low levels of women in management. A survey conducted by UNCDF of 14 MFIs in the country indicates that the majority of employees are women, at 63%, yet 72% of directors and more than half of senior managers are men. And this is in a broader context where in Myanmar, women are a third less likely to be in the workforce than men, as we've indicated, and women's representation in senior management in the private sector more generally is low at approximately 36%. And this is all despite a large amount of international evidence that indicates that workplace gender diversity and leadership diversity is linked with employee recruitment, retention, and organisational performance. In terms of a second key supply-side constraint to women's financial inclusion, that is the lack of use of sex-disaggregated client data. Where it exists in terms of informing product design, financial product design. This is similar to internationally, where challenges have been found to exist in terms of the awareness, availability of sex-disaggregated data and its value, the low levels of quality of this data where it does exist, as well as its general use. In fact, there is a publication which I can refer you to, which sets out the business case for financial service providers to collect this data, and that is a resource called the Value of Sex-Disaggregated Data. In terms of a third key challenge on the supply side for women's financial inclusion, there is an absence of tailored financial products to serve different types of women clients. Demographic data on clients is needed to inform a customer-centric approach, understand behaviours and needs, and in order to tailor commercial value propositions by financial service providers for clients. Without insights from sex-disaggregated data or data disaggregated on other characteristics, this is just not possible. If we turn to supply side opportunities, by overcoming supply side constraints, financial service providers can contribute to women's financial inclusion. They can drive their financial performance, innovation and governance, and also leverage a market opportunity to grow their customer base. For example, in terms of gender diverse leadership, the financial performance of a business is correlated with gender diversity in corporate leadership and greater board diversity linked to financial integrity and financial restatement. In terms of the market opportunity for reaching out to the women's market segment, there's strong global evidence. Women are a profitable client segment with average revenue per customer similar to men. They have lower rates of non-performing loans and better repayment rates. And they're a strong source of savings for banks with lower loan to deposit ratios than men. And there are lower rates of non-performing loans and better repayment rates. And there is evidence also to suggest that women have, amongst some banks, outpaced the overall market in terms of customer growth, credit volume, and deposit growth. So within this broader context, UNCDF has developed the Institutional Gender-Based Self-Assessment Toolkit to enhance financial service providers' institutional policies, practices and performance towards more effectively serving the women's market and improving their institutional policies and practices on gender and women's workforce participation. This toolkit is composed of various sections. So there is the tool itself, and that is broken up into 4 key sections, one on organisational profile information, products and services targeting women and girls, a 3rd section on gender diversity in workforce and leadership, and a 4th focusing on sex-disaggregated data collection and analysis. And this is accompanied by a standardised process with facilitator guides which can support financial service providers in reviewing and evaluating their existing gender approach and developing a strategic plan for addressing this going forward. The process of undertaking this toolkit, or this the GSAT process, is a 3-step process. The first step involves an inception meeting, and during that inception meeting, management of a financial service provider are introduced to the tool and discuss the opportunities and challenges and constraints of targeting the women's market and promoting women's workforce participation and leadership. This meeting and the further strategic meeting involves approximately 3 to 4 representatives, decision makers from financial service providers, representing diverse departments from the institution, and they are encouraged to include at least one woman representative within that group. The second step of the application of the tool is actually undertaking the self-assessment tool itself, so answering the questions set out within the self-assessment tool, and we'll look at that in a moment. The third step after that tool has been applied is a strategy meeting, which is to discuss the results of the application of the tool and in turn to formulate the content to generate a strategic action plan to take forward these actions. Can you please mute yourself if you haven't already done so? In terms of the GSAT, and again we'll introduce you to some of the content in a moment, it's based on various existing approaches that are out there, tailored for slightly different types of institutions. It draws on existing metrics, definitions, tools and good practice management policies and process. For example, Women's World Banking's Gender Performance Initiative, which is focused specifically on MFIs, whilst our tool is broader than this. The Women's World Banking tool looks and supports MFIs to help them diagnose obstacles, challenges and opportunities faced by women staff members and leaders related to the dimensions of recruitment, retention, promotion and professional development. The GSAT tool also draws on indicators used by members of the Financial Alliance for Women, which some of you may be aware of was previously called the Global Banking Alliance for Women. And these are indicators that are used by members to track their performance of their women's market programs, and they share this information.
Sorry,
Catherine, we
there
lost
is
the
no
presentation.
video.
Okay.
We share the video, otherwise I could do it from here.
The video still sharing?
No.
Okay, let's reshare. Okay, bear with me. Share screen. Hopefully it's sharing again. Is that?
Yes.
It's sharing again. Apologies for that. Okay. There are always going to be technical hitches. So hopefully that's the last one. Okay, so just to recap, so we mentioned the Women's World Banking Performance Initiative. There's also the GSAT is drawing inspiration from the Financial Alliance for Women and indicators that they use amongst their members to annually report and their data on their women's market programs. So some of those indicators are on the screen. You can see them there. It also, as a tool, the GSAT draws on the Women's Empowerment Principles, which is a new UN initiative, and these principles have a gender gap analysis tool which helps companies of any size and sector to identify strengths, gaps and opportunities to improve their performance on gender equality. So that is not tailored for financial service providers. So the GSAT has drawn on that and tailored it to financial service providers, in this case in the Myanmar context. The tool itself also, within each section, aims to facilitate a self-assessment of financial services providers' management approach to address a specific aspect of their gender-related performance. So that is from whether it has a gender-related policy or goal in place, whether that is in turn operationalised and implemented in practice, and if so, how, and the extent to which data is then collected and measured on this implementation related to the performance. So it goes from whether you've got a policy to its implementation to the measurement of that to the data and the feedback loop related to that. As noted previously, there are 4 sections of the GSAT tool. Each has questions, specific questions that the financial service provider is asking itself, an indicator protocol which gives clarifications on terms used in the questions to support its consistent interpretation within organisations and between organisations of these questions and the terms. And then there's some probing questions as well as follow-ups to the overarching question. Section A of the tool provides background information on the organisational profile of the institution and asks for key questions. For example, the geographical regions the provider is operating in, its mission statement and strategic objectives and targets. The second section, section B of the tool, focuses on products and services targeting women and girls, and it includes 5 key questions related to the types of products and services on offer, whether they're tailored specifically for women and girls in any respect, how market research is conducted, marketing strategy as well, and whether it's customer centric, and a systematic approach to gather feedback from clients. Section C of the GSAT tool focuses on gender diversity and workforce and leadership and contains 6 key questions. And this is where it's drilling down on questions related to gender equality and gender equal opportunities. You can see there are questions related to maternity and paternity leave, approaches to address gender equality in recruitment, and hiring of based on gender in client-facing roles, and training, etc. The final section, section D, is on sex-disaggregated data collection and analysis, and it includes 15 key questions, and this is where it goes down in more detail on looking at specific metrics, whether or not an institution is able to collect them, whether it does collect them. And this is all framed within the broader question of whether a financial service provider uses a management information system, an MIS, that's digital, and if so, what kind of software is used to support this. I'm going to pause here, and at this point, having introduced you to the tool itself, we will be passing on to Julia to provide further information on the pilot process in terms of the selection of the providers and the key findings and follow-up actions.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you very much, Catherine. So the pilot process of the GSAT tool began in the third quarter of 2017 when UNCDF circulated a call for expression of interest to participate into the gender-based institutional technical support mechanism to financial service providers. Specifically, financial service providers licensed to operate in Myanmar, national and international, were welcome to apply. Afterwards, an internal selection panel independently scored the application based on a number of eligibility criteria, such as customer outreach, business goals, geographic focus, type of support required. And 10 local and international FSPs were selected to participate in the gender self-assessment process. Here you can see in the next slide, you can see the selected institutions, which are microfinance institutions, fintech companies, NGOs, and one international credit union, and one bank. And from February to April 2018, UNCDF staff held 2 meetings, as mentioned by Catherine, the inception meeting and the strategic meeting, with the management of the selected FSPs to plan for and apply the self-assessment process. And here we go on the findings highlighted. The GSAT process highlighted a set of common constraints which are commonly faced by the participant FSPs. The first one is that while the majority of FSPs clients are women, only a few organizations are intentionally targeting women or women-owned business. And specifically, only one organization among those assessed recognized the need of offering products and services specifically designed to meet the particular needs of women. The second challenge is about data. Although all the FSPs collect some basic sex disaggregated data on their clients and workforce, for example, the number of women clients, the number of women staff, the number of women in senior position, among others, this data is not being analyzed in depth, and more complex data, such as, for example, sex disaggregated information on revenues, profitability of segments, savings, loan to deposit ratio, are not collected. Furthermore, these data are frequently not used and might be inaccurate. Also, the sex disaggregated data are commonly not shared with the public nor with the regulator. And here it is relevant to note that information and data plays a key role in financial inclusion, as it enables policymakers to make evidence-based decisions and financial institutions to better understand the opportunities which are offered by the market. In Myanmar, we notice that there is a scarcity of sex disaggregated financial inclusion data. And why? This is mainly due to 2 factors: the lack of technical or financial capacity to collect and analyze the data, and the lack of a regulatory framework. In fact, the main Myanmar financial regulations, which are the microfinance law, the financial institution law, and the regulation on mobile financial services, do not include prescription on on sex disaggregated data collection and analysis. Furthermore, in Myanmar, cultural and social barriers can heavily impact the quality of data. In fact, in the country, although a woman's name may be on the account, she may not have control of it. And more specifically, regarding data collection and analysis, the GSAT highlighted that 5 of the participating FSPs do not have a cloud-based management system, MIS, mainly because of the high cost of purchase and implementation. Instead, data is sent to headquarters on a weekly or a monthly basis, and this practice creates a number of risks, such as human error in transmitting the information, low level of transparency, difficulty in organizing the data to support strategic decision-making, and barriers in disaggregation and categorization of the existing data. The second element is that there is not a structured auditing process of data, and this might lead to inaccuracy of information, low validity, security, and reliability of data collection, to the fact that the data collection process might be not based on standardized definition, such as the definition of small and medium enterprise, the definition of women's own business. And finally, a low quality of data inhibits the use of such data for the FSP's policy and performance analysis. Still, regarding data, we found that many FSPs are not aware of the importance of sex, youth, and other demographic and geographic disaggregated data to inform customer segmentation and product design and services. Consequently, the FSPs face challenges in identifying client segments according to geography, business, loan size, and other variables, recognizing and addressing the needs of the most vulnerable segments, such as women, and recognizing the profit opportunities of serving specific segments of women. Finally, on data, the self-assessment highlighted that 6 of the assessed FSPs do not collect data on satisfaction of their customers. A few institutions use social media such as Viber or Facebook to collect informal feedbacks, but do not follow up on the customer survey insights. Other organizations run surveys sporadically during field visits, but do not analyze in depth the results. Therefore, FSPs have limited insights on customer retention. Without tracking client feedbacks, FSPs lose the opportunity to access crucial data to address weaknesses and improve operations. And furthermore, without information, there are barriers in understanding clients' needs and preference, and consequently, the FSPs may face difficulty in improving their impact on target segments. Moving on, the third common challenges observed by the FSPs participants in the GSAT tool is that FSPs generally have a low level of awareness on women's empowerment and leadership. Specifically, many FSPs have a low understanding of gender equality and women's empowerment concept. None of the FSP appears to be providing systematic trainings on gender concepts such as gender equality and gender-based violence to their clients or to their workforce. The FSPs also do not commonly foresee career paths to advance the leadership of their women employees. And as a consequence, institutional policies, for example, human resources and recruitment policies, are often gender blind. And here, it is relevant to note that it is crucial to increase FSP's gender awareness and diversity. Indeed, gender diverse companies are able to make more innovative business decisions, design superior products, serve clients better, and also have higher profits than non-diverse companies. On the contrary, gender segregation is associated with disparity between genders in productivity and earnings. And the FSPs, which are widely recognized as gender diverse organizations, can not only attract top female talent, but also obtain consistent benefits in attracting new women clients. So recruitment and retention are critical variables due to the labor-intensive nature of the microfinance industry and the Myanmar market. Institutions that develop ad hoc recruitment, retention and promotion policies for women will benefit from this effort, both in terms of social and financial returns. And these are the main constraints that were highlighted by the self-assessment process. So UNCDF develop a number of actions to practically overcome these challenges. The support offered by UNCDF is articulated around two main areas. The first area is collection, digitalization, and analysis of sex-disaggregated data and gender-sensitive product development. And the second area is institutional women's empowerment and leadership. With regard to the first area, as you can see in the slide, UNCDF organized a training on gender-sensitive data analytics and product development from the 30th of October to the 2nd of November 2018. Specifically, the training was offered to 21 middle and senior management, 6 men and 15 women, from the selected FSPs, who mainly works with data and product development or marketing decision-making. The training developed the participant capacity to use a gender-sensitive and customer-centric approach to data analysis and product development, analyze and use market and transaction data to generate customer and market-related insights. Next slide, please. Analyze product uptake and usage through data disaggregated by gender, age, and other demographic factors in order to target the untapped market segments, especially women, and to understand and practice the process of product development through group exercises and a dragon dance activity where participants work in 5 teams, each of which pitch a gender-sensitive product solution, such as an education-saving product, SME lending products, digital self-help groups in remote areas, among others. And the training highlighted a strong need for using customer data analytics in product development for more gender transformative finance in Myanmar. Indeed, as a result of the training, FSP staff feel more confident to analyze the large data set to do so. And the training also emphasized that a limited understanding of market-wide gender norms that impacts the business case for FSPs to offer more gender transformative finance. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, the GSAT process underlined that the institutions have a low level of awareness on women's empowerment and leadership. Therefore, UNCDF identified the need to support the FSP through a revision and evaluation of existing human resource policies where applicable, or support to design new policies related to gender and diversity to identify good practices, gaps, and inconsistencies. And here we refer to policies and practice regarding appointments and assignments, career advancement, staff welfare, trainings, accommodation, among others. Then we will address gender issues within the working environment of the participating FSPs. And finally, UNCDF will design and facilitate capacity building activities on gender awareness, women's leadership, and career advancement to expose the FSP staff to international best practice and demonstrate the business case for enhancing women participation and career advancement. This activity will begin soon, in the 4th quarter of 2019. And what is next in the future? UNCDF is ready to support more FSPs in Myanmar. And probably you remember that at the last year's gender-sensitive data analysis and product development training, there was a Dragon Den activity where teams of participants pitched a gender-sensitive product solution. So some of the pitches showed great potential. So UNCDF, in collaboration with FMO, which is the Dutch Development Bank as investor, and KIT Royal Tropical Institute, will take forward 2 of the proposed product pitches related to women, microenterprise development, and gender transformative finance. Under this initiative, UNCDF will engage 2 Myanmar FSPs in an institutional gender self-assessment, followed by data analytics, product ideation trainings, and targeted technical support. Furthermore, Under the DFID-funded Women's Economic Empowerment, Women's Economic and Financial Inclusion Project, we call WEFIP, which is part of the Expanding Financial Access Myanmar Country Program, UNCDF will engage with another 4 FSPs in Myanmar in an institutional gender self-assessment. And specifically, WEFIP aims at increasing 200,000 women and girls' awareness of, access to, and use of agency over appropriate financial products and services responsibly provided by diverse and sustainable service providers in our regulated environment with a focus on conflict-affected areas. So these are the main findings and follow-up actions of the GSAT process. And in the future, we will continue to engage with FSPs to enhance women's economic empowerment in the least developing countries. Now I pass to Catherine for the Q&A and closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Julia. And it remains to be said that if there are any of you or institutions out there that are interested in participating in the follow-up activities that Julia has referred to, then please do get in touch to find out more details. Our colleague Robin will be in Myanmar and meeting with institutions to discuss these opportunities in the coming weeks, and so there's an opportunity to specifically engage with him on that. In terms of questions from the floor, we're going to just have a look at any of the messages that we've received from you to see if there are any particular questions. Okay. If any of you have any questions for us, please can you either use the chat function, or you're also welcome to unmute yourself and share your question directly to us.
Yes, sorry, I have a question.
Please go ahead.
My name is Julio from Early Dawn Microfinance, Myanmar. I would like to know what are going to be the criteria to choose these additional 4+2 FSPs in Myanmar to participate in this program.
Sure, thank you. Well, we're joined by Robin from our team on the call, and I think he'll be able to answer that question. Robin, over to you, please.
Yeah, sure, thanks. So basically here from the Bangkok office, and we have our country staff as well. Essentially, the idea would be to, for those organizations who've already done a gender self-assessment, and we can build on some of the practices that came out of it and some of the diagnostics that were made. For the ones who haven't done it yet, the idea would be to do a somewhat similar self-assessment. It could be a more intensive one, followed immediately by data analytics support, as well as some additional data collection is a component in each of these interventions. There's 6 interventions in total with 6 MFIs and banks and service providers. I think one of the things that we need to realize is that we often underestimate the market opportunities of segmentation analytics, for example. We found with a study that we've done in Cambodia, we found that can add a couple of $1 million to a loan portfolio and to a deposit portfolio if products and services are better delivered to women entrepreneurs and to women micro finance clients. So this is one of the items to sort of not so much to do analysis for the sake of analysis, but to establish the business case for better women servicing. So yeah, that's and so there will be 3-4 steps in for each of these financial service providers. Gender self-assessment if they haven't done that yet, and then through that inform some and do some customer data analytics and inform product and service delivery, as well as some of the other things on staffing policies, for example, could be one of them as well. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Robin. So in terms of a follow-up question, we've had a question from Hilary Nichols, who is asking whether UNCDF plans to scale the toolkit beyond Myanmar and what would be needed to change to take this globally, and whether we feel the toolkit is universal. Well, to answer that question, Hilary, yes, there is an intention that Myanmar was just a pilot of this, and so there is an opportunity to refine what has been developed and also to take it beyond. As you're aware, UNCDF focuses on the least developed countries, and they're not country programs in every LDC at the moment, but where they do exist, there are opportunities for UNCDF to take this forward. In terms of scaling beyond these countries, however, there is appetite there, and with partners who are interested in taking this toolkit and using it, and any future adapted version of it, to use it for working with financial service providers in countries, and we'd be very happy for them to do so. So if that is something that any of your institutions are interested in doing in other countries, or to help facilitate as a technical partner, then do let us know. In terms of additional questions, we have had a question from Lorraine regarding the reaction of financial providers when we were doing the assessment, because this is a very new way of providing services as a people-centric approach. Maybe, Julia, over to you. What was that reaction of the providers when you were having the conversations with them?
So the reaction was very positive. Particularly, they liked that the tool was divided in different sections, and many of them mentioned that the tool allowed us to consider elements that they normally do not consider, and indeed it helped the providers to recognize the importance of offering products and services to specific people. So indeed, the new approach is way more people-centered.
Thank you very much, Julia. In terms of other questions, we've had a question around, does the approach you are taking include any assessment of how these trainings or awareness impact gender norms in the communities FSPs live and work? That is from Giselle Davico. Thank you for that question. And Julia, any points that you want to make in response to that question?
Yes, so as the toolkit was developed using the studies that UNCDF did in 2016 and 2017, in the tool there are already elements regarding the influence of norms and cultural. Plus, in the discussion during the meetings, we request information on the norms and of the barriers, how the barriers and the norms are perceived within the institution, both while dealing with clients, but also within in the actions taken by the workforce.
Thank you, Julia. And we can refer you to the results of the Myanmar country assessment on women's financial inclusion constraints, which goes into more detail about some of these social norms constraints that not only affect supply side constraints, but also interact on the demand side and in the broader enabling environment. And that is something, and an understanding of these constraints, that is being taken forward in the future and current programming activities that UNCDF is doing in Myanmar, such as the WeFip work in conflict-affected regions. In terms of another question, we have a question here from Rahul from Microsave Consulting. How are you treating the aspect of customer protection and data privacy in GSAT? This is an important aspect, as women generally are disproportionately affected by customer protection issues. Would you like to address that, Julia, Robin?
Or perhaps Robin, because this is more on data.
Yeah, so of course, as a United Nations agency, we take protection of data at the highest standard, and so this is always something to look into. And it goes in two ways. So one is the making sure that there's a proper protection of the data that's there among in floating around within the banks and within the MFIs. The other issue I think we often sort of miss or again underestimate is also the potential to utilize that data for better servicing of women. And that's also something where I think from the gender self-assessment, it was also quite clear that a lot of institutions don't have those tools in place. So that it works both ways, I think.
Thank you, Robin. Something to just alert you to is, that and remind you all that there are different regulatory environments vary from country to country with respect to how data can be used by financial service providers, and this can in some instances be a challenge to using sex disaggregated data or customer data that's disaggregated on other characteristics as well. I'd like to just point you to resources that exist addressing some of these concerns by the likes of the Financial Alliance for Women, because their members have addressed that in different country contexts and found workarounds to being able to use data based on these different regulatory regimes that exist, and how there can be workarounds for this to still gather the insights that are needed. So do look at their resources on data. We have a question here around from Yosra Banagi, which is wondering how soon FSPs should apply this toolkit, as they're in the process of establishing the first MFI in Libya, and they want to know if it's too early to be looking at such as assessment. So that's the first question. Well, I think to answer that, it's not too early. This is all about understanding what the strategy is as an organisation, and you can certainly apply these questions to your thinking as you're developing the strategy for a new organisation as well. They're really pertinent questions and draw on general market research, which we would imagine that you would be undertaking anyway to be establishing your provider. In terms of your second question, you ask about the feasibility of designing female-specific financial products, and what is the feasibility of that? Well, I'll hand over to Julia in a second, but just to say, there are plenty of examples out there, maybe not in the Myanmar context, of specific products that have either been tailored to the women's market for different economic segments, whether that's women MSME owners or women farmers, for example. And there are also gender-specific products that are out there as well. So you can draw on what's out there and learning experiences from other country contexts. So it is feasible, certainly, and there are lessons learned from past experiences which we've been applying to the Myanmar pilot. Maybe, Julia, would you like to elaborate a little bit more on the feasibility of designing these products, female-specific products, women's products?
Yeah,
learnings
absolutely.
From the Myanmar pilot.
Yeah, so absolutely. There is in Myanmar, there is a lot of room for designing female-specific products. One of the problems is that the data collection and analysis, because data should need to be analyzed in order to understand which are the constraints that the products and services will need to address in the future. It would be also important to have within the MFIs and other FSPs people able to do so, so in terms of human capital and technical capacity. And it's also important from the regulator and from international organization to set an enabling environment to where receive products that targeted the needs of women and girls in Myanmar. And I guess this is relevant in many countries in Southeast Asia, not only Myanmar.
Thank you, Julia. Another question we have from Zunlin Tun is, will there be another similar workshop this year? And if so, will UNCDF also consider including fintech companies in the workshop who are dealing with data as well? Maybe Robin, would you like to just provide an update on future plans for workshops in Myanmar around data?
Yeah, so certainly there will be some events as part of the whole new DFID project and approach. So definitely that will come in due course. And the other thing I think that's really relevant to say is that there's also a lot of maybe related to the previous questions. So fintech could definitely also apply for and attend. Because the issue is the same for them. We recently have launched fintech innovations in Myanmar, where we see very similar challenges in a way. It's what came out of the gender self-assessment, and they're not necessarily different. It's not that data is used so much better necessarily just because it's a financial technology. We have. As was mentioned, the FinScope data, maybe good to elaborate what it exactly is. This is a national picture of the formal and informal market in Myanmar, both in terms of access to savings, access to credit, access to payments, how people manage their money, whether they, for example, experience stress when they receive finance. The financial capability is there. We also have information from that survey on who in the household controls the money. So there's a number of more advanced, let's say, gender insights that we can pull up from that. We also have a whole range of focus group discussions that we've done. So there's actually more data available, I think, than we often think. And one thing that those types of data also allow us to do is, for example, to benchmark some of the specific client portfolios of MFIs or fintech firms to the national data, and also to think around, okay, which area could we expand to in the future? What are the provinces which are underserved? What are the provinces which are overserved, etc. So I think that's also related maybe to the previous question a bit, but definitely, yeah, we see a need for doing more workshops as well.
Thank you, Robin. So another question we've received is why we're focusing on sex disaggregated data, or focusing on specifically on gender inclusion, both in terms of data collection, but more generally, as opposed to broader aspects of inclusion and other demographic and geographical characteristics. So the background on that, I think Robin's also alluded to the fact that we do recognise that gender is intersectional with other characteristics, and the toolkit does go to some way to elaborate on that. But we chose very specifically to be focusing on gender because of some of the different patterns of financial access and usage that we can see in the data that exists emerging from these national data sets on the demand and supply side, and also from the well-established social norms constraints that we realise intersect and influence women and men's differential patterns of financial access, usage and control as well. That's not to say that these other aspects aren't important, and they're part and crucial in understanding and taking a customer-centric approach to financial product design and serving these markets. I know whether, Robin, you want to add to that around looking at data in terms of other characteristics other than in terms of sex disaggregated data in data analytics.
Yeah, so same. So going beyond sort of whether we were born a man or woman, what's very important also is to think about, okay, is gender gap smaller for young men and women? How is it in rural areas? To dive much deeper. And for example, just a couple of, just to throw out a couple of stats, 58% of the women in Myanmar feel that a job is a requirement to open a bank account. So that means that 42% doesn't go to the bank because they think they might not be eligible. And so in that case, you could look at the segment of women who have a job. The same with who's responsible for money management. When we asked that question to a woman, 29% of them said that they are responsible for money management. When we asked it to men, it was 39%. And likewise, men often said that they're the one to decide. So think around what the consequences could be when you launch, let's say, a loan, a micro-enterprise loan in the field, and you don't take into considerations those types of things for products. It can mean a failure of the product. And of course, that's much more expensive than sort of, collecting this data, to be quite frank. So yeah, that's in a just some examples.
Mm-hmm. And actually, just to add to what Robin has said, and if you do look at the agenda, women's financial inclusion country assessment for Myanmar, which was conducted a couple of years ago, there you will see that these constraints and financial needs and barriers do vary based on a woman's differential stages of their life, from marriage to caring from a family to spousal death, for example, as well as has been indicated in terms of economic segment. And that is also true for men and boys as well. I do encourage you to look at that to understand more for the framing that we have in terms of considering these different constraints and different aspects of data for a customer-centric approach. Final couple of questions. So one is that all financial institutions are aiming to make a profit. How do you convince them to focus on gender to help them get more profit? Well, in terms of that, there is evidence out there from other countries which we can point you to, which highlights that there can be returns on investment from that. I also look at the Financial Alliance for Women's data that has emerged from their members, which shows how those who have women's market programs are having success with reaching out to them. There is a final question from looking at how we're working to get these strategies that have been developed by the financial service providers in the workshops that have been conducted with them to then be implemented in practice within their respective institutions. So maybe, Julia, would you like to just elaborate on that before we close?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see there is also one extra question now. So we are following up with institutions to understand how they are applying what they learn into the trainings. We are also, as mentioning, two of the products that were pitched into the trainings will be brought into the market in the future. So it is that's certainly an application of what was learned into the training. Plus, with regards to the institutional support of human resource and women's leadership, right after the analysis of the institutional policies of the participating FSPs, we will have specific trainings on the development and application of those policies by the FSP. So we will hope to see that the learnings will be put immediately into practice.
Thank you very much. And I guess just to close by saying, and in response to a question around any cultural issues that might occur, that there is increasing recognition when we're looking at financial inclusion, whether that's financial inclusion of men, women, boys or girls, in the social norms related factors that can interact in leveraging or providing opportunities for financial inclusion, but also presenting constraints as well. And so UNCDF and others are increasingly acknowledging that and finding ways to address that and work with financial service providers. So there is that greater acknowledgement there that these cultural factors do need to be considered. At this point, I'd like to really say thank you to all of you for tuning in for today's presentation and webinar, and for asking so many valuable questions. And for those of you who also participated in the Myanmar pilot, thank you. We couldn't have done it without you and without the support of the Australian government as well. We will be sharing the PowerPoint presentation after the webinar and the toolkit, which is available on the UNCDF website. We'll share the link for that as well. And there's also a blog which is coming online shortly, which will be exploring some of the issues that we've raised in the presentation today. So thank you all very much for your time. Any final remarks from Rajiv? Over to you.
Catherine, Julia, Robin. Right?
Yeah.
No, Catherine, thanks a lot for this, and thank you all for participating. We'll be happy to respond to you if you have any further queries. Please write to us, and we'd also look forward to looking at partnerships where you would like to implement this too. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Bye bye.